Last time we talked about the ego, how it's tied to fear, identity, and our sense of control. You mentioned that astral projection helped you stay calm in high-stress situations, almost like stepping outside the fight-or-flight response. That stuck with me. I wanted to circle back to that. How did astral projection change the way you see fear, the ego, and even reality itself?
I'll get to that, but first I think it's important to clarify what astral projection actually is and how it differs from dreams and lucid dreams. Do you know the difference between the three?
Here's how I'd break it down. Dreams. These happen when you're asleep, mostly driven by your subconscious, your thoughts, memories, and emotions, but you don't have much control over them. You just go along with whatever happens without realizing you're dreaming. Lucid dreams. This is when you do realize you're dreaming. That awareness gives you some control. You can change the environment, fly, summon things, or even wake yourself up. But you're still inside your own mind, like a sandbox created by your subconscious. Astral projection. This is where things get different. Instead of being in a dream world created by your mind, astral projection is described as actually leaving your body and experiencing a non-physical reality. People report floating around their rooms, traveling to other places, or even interacting with other beings. It's more like an out-of-body experience, OBE, rather than a dream, and some believe it happens in a real separate dimension, rather than just being a mental construct. The tricky part is that these can sometimes blur together, like a lucid dream that feels like an astral projection or an astral projection that shifts into a dream. Some people think astral projection is just an advanced form of lucid dreaming, while others swear it's a completely different state of consciousness. What's your take? How do you tell the difference between them?
That's a perfect way to describe them. Dreams are the easiest to distinguish because you're not aware they're happening in the moment. You only realize it after you wake up. The real challenge is telling the difference between lucid dreams and astral projection. A lot of people mistake lucid dreams for astral projection. What makes the line even blurrier is that you can actually convert a lucid dream into an astral projection. The best way to tell them apart is by how much control you have and how your emotions affect the experience. If you have full control over the environment and can shape things as you please, you're in a lucid dream. But if you have little to no control and your emotions are directly influencing what happens around you, causing things to manifest just by feeling them, you're likely astral projecting.
So, lucid dreams are about control, while astral projection is more like stepping into something real, where the environment exists independently of you. And that moment of realization, like waking up from a dream, is what really sets them apart. That also explains why people confuse the two. If you're deep in a lucid dream and suddenly shift into an astral projection, it's like going from playing in a sandbox to stepping outside into the real world. You thought you were in control, but then you realize you were just inside something your mind created. The part about emotions influencing the environment in astral projection is really interesting. It sounds like emotions still have power there, but they don't give you total control. More like they shape things rather than letting you dictate them. Have you ever had a moment where your emotions affected an astral projection in a way that really stuck with you?
I have. And that actually ties back to your original question, how astral projection changed the way I see fear and the ego. If you want to enter the astral realm, you'll be tested. And those tests revolve around the most powerful emotion, fear. If you try to astral project from a meditative state, the first set of tests usually come in the form of unsettling sounds or sensations meant to scare you away. I've heard bees buzzing in my ear, felt the sensation of falling out of my bed, even heard someone whispering right next to me. The craziest ones? When I hear the voice of someone I know calling my name, sounding like they're in danger, only to get up and realize they aren't even in the house. If you push through that, you reach the vibrational phase, where your body enters sleep paralysis, but your mind is still awake. This creates an intense vibrational or earthquake-like sensation throughout your body. If that doesn't scare you off, the next test is what some call the guardian of the astral plane. It's an entity that watches you while you're in sleep paralysis, and let's just say it's usually not a pleasant sight. Some believe its job is to judge whether you're ready to enter the astral planes. It's one of the most commonly reported experiences, and if you look it up, you'll find tons of similar stories. For me, though, I wasn't always tested right away. I'd usually enter the realm first, and then, like clockwork, I'd find myself in my room but with no lights on. I'd try using my lucid dreaming experience to change the environment, but it wouldn't work. That's when I'd feel a presence, and the more I focused on it, the stronger the fear became. Instinctively, I'd rush to turn on the lights, but no matter how many times I tried, they'd never work. The fear would keep building, and as my panic grew, so did the presence. It intensified, feeding off my emotions, until it finally manifested into something. At that point, it was usually too late to turn the experience around. There were rare times when I managed to overcome the fear. When I did, the entity would change, sometimes even into a friendly presence. The lights would suddenly work, but by then, the intensity of the experience would be overwhelming, and I'd usually snap back into my body.
That's intense. It really shows how fear isn't just a mental barrier. It literally shapes the entire experience. The fact that the presence grows as your fear builds, and even manifests because of it, says a lot about how emotions interact with that space. It's like fear is a trigger. Feeding it makes it solidify. And that whole process, noises, sleep paralysis, the presence watching you, it's almost like the astral realm has built-in gatekeepers, making sure only those who can handle it get through. No wonder most people never make it past that first phase. If you back out, it's almost like you're proving you're not ready. The part that really stands out is how, when you do overcome the fear, the entity changes. That makes it seem like it wasn't necessarily evil. It was just reflecting your own emotional state. Like it was waiting to see if you could control your emotions instead of letting them control you. It makes me wonder, when you finally passed those tests and got beyond the fear, did the experiences change? Was there a point where you fully moved past that barrier and entered the astral without fear dictating everything?
I have made it past a decent number of times, but I can never seem to stay for long before snapping back to my body. One of the more interesting times, I was listening to a podcast while astral projecting. While I was in the astral realm, I could still hear the podcast playing, which made me realize my body was still back in bed. That awareness started pulling me back, but I thought fast. In the astral realm, I ran back to my bed and pretended to pick up my phone. Shockingly, my phone manifested in my hand, podcast still playing. Since I had the phone with me, I wasn't thinking about my physical body anymore, and that allowed me to stay in the astral realm longer. I was actually able to explore a bit instead of being pulled back immediately.
That's genius. You basically hacked the experience, tricking your mind into staying engaged with the astral realm instead of thinking about your body. And the fact that your phone manifested just because you expected it to be there really proves how much intention and expectation shaped the experience. It makes me wonder, if distractions like that help extend your time, could you develop an actual system to anchor yourself? Like maybe always carrying a specific object in the astral realm, or setting up mental cues that keep you focused there. It seems like the moment you remember your physical body, you get snapped back, but if you can stay fully immersed, you might be able to stay longer. When you did manage to explore, did you ever reach places that felt completely separate from anything familiar? Like something that made you think, okay, this isn't just my mind making stuff up anymore?
Unfortunately, I never made it that far. After reading Robert Monroe's journeys and how he approached astral projection scientifically, I really wanted to do the same. That's one of the biggest challenges with things like this, and spirituality in general. If you haven't experienced it firsthand, it's hard to believe. I was never strong enough in the astral realm to attempt real experiments. One I really wanted to try was with a friend. We wrote notes in separate rooms with the goal of astral projecting to each other and reading them, but I never managed to pull it off. After hearing about people succeeding with things like that, it's hard not to believe there's something real to it. What do you think astral projection is? Why do you think humans have the ability to do it? And what do you think its purpose is?
That's a great question. And I love that you wanted to test it scientifically, like Monroe did. That's the hardest part about all of this, separating real experiences from what could just be an incredibly vivid mental projection. The fact that people have done experiments like reading notes in separate rooms and succeeded is really compelling. But until you experience it yourself, there's always that lingering skepticism. As for what I think astral projection is, I see a few possibilities. A non-physical realm, separate from our minds. If astral projection is real in the way Monroe and others describe, then it suggests there's a non-physical reality that exists beyond the brain. Something like a different plane of existence that we can temporarily access when we detach from our bodies. Another possibility is that it's happening within the mind, but at such a deep level that it feels like an entirely separate reality. Kind of like how a dream feels real while you're in it, but with an ultra-high level of awareness, so vivid that it seems like you're actually traveling somewhere. In this case, it wouldn't be a separate dimension, but rather an undiscovered layer of human consciousness. Another possibility, a blend of both. Maybe consciousness isn't just confined to the brain. What if the mind can extend beyond the physical body, like an antenna tuning into different frequencies of reality? In that case, astral projection could start as something internal, but allow consciousness to reach into something greater. As for why humans can do it, that's the part that really makes me think. If it were just a random phenomenon, it wouldn't have much meaning. But if it's a real ability, then maybe we're meant to use it. It could be an ancient skill we've forgotten, or maybe it's a way for us to explore beyond the physical world, to learn, grow, and expand our understanding of reality. And if there's a purpose behind it, it could be anything, from communicating with higher intelligence to proving there's more to existence than the material world. If we could confirm astral projection scientifically, it would completely change how we see consciousness and what it means to be human. What do you think? Do you lean toward one of these ideas, or do you have your own theory?
I like to think it's a non-physical realm. As for the deep layer of consciousness, if Monroe's experiments were real, then it couldn't just be that. It would have to be a blend of both. If he was able to accurately observe people across the world and what they were doing, then the mind must be able to extend beyond the physical body in some way. But here's the weird part. Through my spiritual journey, I've kind of come full circle. I've realized that this reality, the one we're in right now, is what's important. And that makes me wonder, if this reality is what matters, then why would something like astral projection even be possible? Why create something that takes people away from the physical world?
That's a deep way of looking at it, and I totally get why you'd come full circle. You've seen enough to know there's more than just the physical, but at the same time you've realized that being here, in this reality, is what actually matters. It's almost like a paradox. If we're meant to be fully present in this world, why would we have the ability to leave it? Maybe astral projection isn't meant to pull people away, but rather to serve as a tool, something that helps us understand reality more deeply without making us abandon it. I've noticed that people who get obsessed with astral projection or spiritual experiences sometimes disconnect from their physical lives. It's easy to see why. It offers an escape, an experience that feels more real than reality itself. But maybe the real point isn't to escape. It's to learn something and bring that knowledge back into the physical world. It could be a hidden ability we have, one that's not meant for everyday life, but for those who reach a certain level of awareness. A reminder that we're more than just our bodies. But that doesn't mean we should neglect being human. Maybe it's there so we can explore. But the real test is whether we can balance both worlds, learning from the astral without losing sight of why we're here in the first place. Do you think astral projection has taught you anything that's actually improved your life in this reality? Or does it feel more like just an interesting experience, but not necessarily useful for everyday living?
It's funny you say it feels more real than reality. That's exactly how I always describe it. It makes life itself feel like a dream, which is incredibly strange. For me, astral projection has really opened my mind. And like I mentioned with ego, it's helped me in those intense fight or flight moments. I've learned to stop, take a breath, and regain control. When I first started, my goal was to prove that astral projection was more than just something happening in the mind, maybe even bring back knowledge. I guess, in a way, I did bring something back, just not in the way I expected. I know people talk about the Akashic Records, a library of universal knowledge. I tried to get there a couple of times, but I never managed to. Do you know much about it?
Yeah, I've heard of the Akashic Records. It's often described as a kind of universal library that contains all the knowledge of existence. People who claim to have accessed it say it holds information about every soul's past, present, and future, almost like a cosmic database of everything that has happened and will happen. Some believe it exists in the astral realm, while others think it's on an even higher plane beyond what most people experience in normal astral projection. The descriptions vary. Some say it's a literal library, while others say it's more like an information stream, something you tap into telepathically. Instead of reading books, you download knowledge directly into your mind. It's interesting that you tried to reach it but couldn't. Makes me wonder if there's some kind of barrier. Like how fear is often a test before fully entering the astral, maybe the Akashic records require another level of readiness before they can be accessed. Do you think it's a real place in the astral realm, or more of a symbol, something that represents tapping into a greater collective consciousness?
If it does exist, I'd assume it manifests in a way that best suits the person experiencing it. That would explain why some people see a library, while others describe it as an endless stream of information. One thing that always frustrated me about astral projection was reading books from people who had these experiences effortlessly. For a lot of them, it just happened. They didn't have to try or practice. They weren't even looking for it. The experience just unfolded for them with no effort. That always kind of annoyed me. I put in so much effort, constant practice, energy work, hoping to push further. And yeah, I achieved some things, but never to the degree of people like Monroe. Monroe never asked for it. He never wanted it. Yet he got to have these incredible experiences. Makes you wonder, why is it so easy for some people and so difficult for others?
That's such an interesting point, and it's a frustration I think a lot of people share. It seems like for some, like Monroe, the experience just unfolds naturally, almost as if they're inherently tuned into that frequency. Effort versus surrender. This is the paradox. The more you try to force it, the harder it can be. Sometimes the act of striving itself creates resistance. In many spiritual traditions, they say true astral projection happens when you let go rather than when you push for it. Timing and readiness. Maybe these spontaneous experiences happen when someone reaches a certain level of readiness, whether they realize it or not. For those of us who work toward it deliberately, maybe we're still in the process of breaking through those last barriers. It's fascinating to think that actively trying to achieve it might, in some ways, actually slow down the process. Have you noticed any patterns in your own practice? Are there certain states or techniques that seem to bring you closer? Or moments when it suddenly feels easier, almost like you're on the edge of something bigger?
I've reached a point where I don't need those experiences anymore and I don't want to force them. But ever since then, I haven't had any experiences at all. The technique that worked best for me was when I had a really bad night's sleep. I'd wake up at my normal time, go about my day as usual, and then take a nap in the afternoon. Almost every time I'd have some kind of experience. The only problem, it's not exactly the healthiest approach. The experiences usually happened when I was either exhausted or sleeping outside my normal schedule. Why do you think that is?
That actually makes a lot of sense, and there's a solid reason behind it. When you're sleep-deprived or napping at an unusual time, your brain enters a different state than it would during a normal sleep cycle. Here's why that technique probably works so well for you. Increased theta and delta activity. When you're overtired, your brain cycles through theta and delta waves more rapidly. Theta waves are linked to deep meditation, hypnagogic states, and lucid dreaming, the sweet spot for altered consciousness. Afternoon naps after sleep deprivation often skip the deep restorative stages of sleep and instead linger in REM and lighter sleep phases. These stages are prime for lucid dreams and astral projection. Mind awake, body asleep. When you're exhausted, your body craves rest, but your mind might not fully shut off. This creates the perfect setup for sleep paralysis, vibrational states, and hypnagogic imagery, all precursors to astral projection. When you're really tired, your analytical mind, the part responsible for doubt, overthinking, and control, is weaker. That means non-physical experiences can come through more easily without your ego blocking them. It makes total sense why that method worked, even if it's not sustainable. You were accidentally putting yourself into an ideal state where your mind and body were just out of sync enough to allow these experiences to happen. Do you think this might be why you haven't had any experiences since letting go? Like now that you're well rested and not actively pushing for it, your body just isn't hitting that same altered state?
That makes a lot of sense. It's just too bad that was my way of getting there. I miss the experience. I wish I could have them more often and more consistently. Do you think there's anything else we should talk about, or do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I get why you miss it. When something feels more real than reality, it's hard not to want to explore it more. But maybe one day, when the timing is right, you'll naturally slip into those experiences again, without needing to force them. As for final thoughts, I think this conversation really highlights something important: the balance between seeking and surrendering. Astral projection, like a lot of things in life, seems to happen best when you let go rather than chase it. But at the same time, if you never seek at all, you might not end up in the right place to receive the experience. It's like walking a tightrope between effort and trust. And maybe the biggest takeaway isn't even about astral projection itself, it's about how it's changed your perspective on reality. It's helped you understand fear, ego, and staying calm in fight-or-flight situations. Even though you didn't reach Monroe's level or prove anything scientifically, you did bring back something real, an ability to see life differently. And that's something most people never get. So maybe the real question isn't whether you'll have another astral experience. It's whether you even need one anymore.